Hi guys, welcome to my channel. I'm Mark on RC 74. In today's episode of my RC Scrappy, we jump a little bit back in time. This video will be all about wrapping RC Scrappy with Oracal 751. The reason for this is that I recorded a lot of wrap steps I did during the build and I didn't use this footage so far. So I decided to make a time-lapse video, guide you through the steps with a few words to give you a better idea how I solved all the wrapping of the different shapes of RC Scrappy's parts. The first part I wrapped was the cover for rudder and elevator servo and receiver and electronics for the light system. The reason for this is that it's a simple part, so there wasn't much which can go wrong, and I was able to learn how the Oracal 751 foil behaves. So what I figured out pretty quick, that I have to use the heat gun at around 80 degrees Celsius to get it in perfect shape. It's already a bit flexible when you use it at room temperature, but the heat gun at 80 degrees Celsius helps you a lot to get it very easy in perfect shape on round corners and all that stuff. Then I had to do all the edges. There I had to do a lot of cuts to make all perfectly fit without any wrinkles. And like this, the first part came out surprisingly well. I didn't expect to have no issues to make that first part look pretty good. Next parts to wrap were the wing rods. They were wrapped in orange. Before I started to wrap them, I painted all ends and the center part in black, just because these parts were not wrapped and I wanted to have them in black color. Then I had to cut out the center part to make the mount for the wing rod support fit perfectly. This was a simple rectangular hole I had to cut into the Oracal foil. Then it was pretty easy to wrap the rods. I had just to go just around and wrap the rods with this orange Oracal foil. One important thing you can see here is that Oracal covers very well dark colors, so the wing rods are in bright gray color, stock color, and now I have also the black color underneath the orange Oracal wrap. So as you can see, there is no issues with black color shining through the orange foil. So I'm pretty happy how Oracal covers all the different colors underneath the foil. So there is no need to put any primer on your parts to make all the parts have the same color. So you can have different colors underneath Oracal and it still works. Next part I wrapped was the rudder. That was slightly more complex than the other parts I did before, but all in all it worked the same. I just cut out the raw shape of the foil I needed and put it on the rudder, and as you can see here too, we have different colors underneath the foil. There is some white foam and some orange foam, and there's absolutely no issue with different colors you can see through the final result of the wrapped rudder. Tricky moments were, for example, to cut out the shape around the rudder horn, and later also the edges. I was really surprised about the result of the wrapping on the edges. I wasn't sure if this will even work at all, to wrap Oracal around all the edges and make everything look nice and clean. But also here, with using the heat gun, the result also around all the edges is absolutely great. You just need to cut a clean line on the edges to make the edges almost invisible. All the tight corners were the most tricky areas on this part, but in the end that looked all good. Then it was time for the other side of the rudder. Same here, and at this part it was the most important to get a perfectly clean edge all around the rudder to make the final result look as perfect as possible. You can see also here I heated up the foil to wrap it around the edge, and like this I was able to cut off all the excess and make all the edges look absolutely clean. Just be careful not cut into the rudder, and like this you have an absolutely great looking part. Then it was time for the elevator. These are all in black, also on full-scale Scrappy. So this is almost exactly the same procedure as on Rudder. Shape is almost the same. It's just the center part which connects the left and the right side of the elevator, which is a bit different than on Rudder. But all in all, it was exactly the same. Also the same behavior of the black foil, so I also didn't recognize any difference in behavior of the foil, no matter what color you use. So every color I use, this is orange, it's black, it's silver, and it's gray. Every single color behaved exactly the same, so absolutely no difference from different colors. Also here the exact same procedure. Be careful cutting on the round corners to avoid cutting into the rudder or into elevator in this case. But everything went well, and also the elevator parts looked absolutely clean in the end. In general, it's very important to take your time doing all the wrap job, because yeah, you can really mess up pretty quick because the foil is super thin, and if you don't be careful, you will have wrinkles you cannot get out of the foil anymore. So foil works really great, but always keep calm and take your time to make sure that there is no unnecessary mistake during the wrapping job. Then I had to cut off some excess from the center part, which is also painted in black, not wrapped. I thought this is easier to paint instead of wrapping the whole center part, which connects both sides of the elevator. Then there is a single small spot which stays in white after the two layers, so I had to cut a small part of black foil to also cover this last white part of the elevator. Then it was time for horizontal stabilizer. On this part I used silver again, also same as on full-scale Scrappy. On this part it's a bit special that there is a mount for the support rods for the horizontal stabilizer and for vertical stabilizer. So I had to do a small cut to make the mounts come through the foil, and then also exactly the same procedure here as on rudder and elevator. The hinges were already glued into the horizontal stabilizer, so I had to cut off the foil around the hinges, but that was no big deal. Just get around the hinges, cut all the excess off, and then it's all done to make also the horizontal stabilizer look perfectly clean. Next step was to go for the flaps. The flaps are in two parts, so each flap is made of two parts. And also here, almost the same procedure. Also had to do a cut to make the rudder horn go through the foil, which is already glued into the flap. And in general, if you use the scissor, it's very important to always remove any small bits of foil off the blade of the scissor, just to avoid the small bits stuck on the sticky side of your foil, because it's almost impossible to remove these small bits if they stuck on the sticky side of your foil. So be careful about this. Always keep the blades of your scissor clean. Like this you can avoid getting in trouble with small bits on the foil you want to wrap your parts with. The easiest part was to wrap foam in case of bubbles. You have also absolutely no problem with having bubbles on the foamy surface. It's another thing on carbon surface. On the flaps, on this part you can see here, the rear end edge is carbon, and there you have to be careful to avoid bubbles. You can also do it wet, but I wanted to avoid any wet situation because of the foam parts. I had no idea how the foam reacts and how the water will get out of the foam when you have wrapped the whole part. So I didn't use any water on the whole wrap job. And also make sure that there is no foil left which sticks on the hinges, just to make sure that all the hinges will work absolutely perfect and free. To make both ends look nice and clean, I cut some small bits and covered both ends of the flap with a separate piece of foil, and like this the flaps look also nice and clean. Next step were the whole wings. This is the biggest part of the whole plane, which I had to wrap in one piece. So these were massive foil pieces, around 95 centimeters long. It's really no problem to wrap also big parts. It's for sure an easy surface because it's almost completely flat. There were only a few mounts and servos. I had to be careful and cut around and make sure that the holes were at the exact right spot. Here I am cutting the first hole for the aileron servo. The next cuts I had to do were for the mounts for the wing rod support, and then the last one was then the inner servo, which is the flap servo on both wings. As you can see, during the process there were some little wrinkles on the foil, but that's no problem because it's vinyl foil. It's super stretchy, and you can put on the foil even with small wrinkles on it, and the wrinkles go out without any problems. It's really easy to get a nice clean looking result, also with having wrinkles during the process. But always avoid to stick the sticky side of the foil together. As soon as this happens, you will get in trouble to get the foil clean. So you have to remove the whole foil, and this is then pretty tricky if the foil already stuck well on the surface, especially if it's foam surface, but also on carbon fiber. I really tried this and had a hard time to remove the foil off the surface. So really, again, take your time, be sure that there is no unnecessary mistakes, because getting the foil off your surface is pretty hard. Then I cut all the openings for the servos, for the slats, and screwed on the servos, and also all the edges were wrapped and heated up to make them sit perfectly clean. Then the aileron horns had also a gap where I had to cut off the foil. It helps to have a sharp metal part or whatever, a ruler or something, where you can push the foil into this step, and like this you get a nice clean step, and you can heat up the foil, then it really goes perfectly clean into a step and you have no issues at all. Then it was time again to cut around the already glued hinges. Then it was time for the top side. This was a little bit trickier because it's round shaped on the top side, but as you can see, I really simply had to stretch and lift a little bit the foil, and everything went perfectly well. So the wrapping of the wing was really nice and clean progress, no big issues. And always important, if you get in trouble, don't try to get out the wrinkles just like this, but use your heat gun. It really helps massively to get small little wrinkles out of the foil and gets you a way better looking final result. After the maiden flight with RC SCRAPPY, I figured out that the Oracal foil gets pretty sticky if it's heated up by the sun. So the root side of the inner side of the wing is put into the root on the fuselage, into the wing root of the fuselage, and then you have contact of around 1 centimeter of foil which goes into the ring root on the fuselage. And the issue I had after the maiden flight, that the foil was that sticky I couldn't almost pull out the wing out of the fuselage of the root of the wing root of the fuselage. So what I did after the maiden flight, I wrapped the root part of the wing with some simple clear crystal tape from Tesa, which helps to avoid sticky situation of Oracal on other parts, so you cannot remove the parts anymore. And on the second flight, also on a sunny day, the issues were absolutely gone with using this Tesa crystal tape. The outer end of the wing is also in black color, also identical to full-scale Scrappy. This was pretty simple, it's just a stripe around 1 centimeter wide, which I had to wrap around the outer end of the wing. And just around the front end I had to heat up a little bit the foil to make sure that it stays in shape and goes to the right direction without any wrinkles. And it was time for the first parts on the fuselage. I started with the belly part. For this part I don't have any video footage, but there are some pictures. This was a nice and clean job. I was surprised because it's everything carbon fiber surface, and I was able to avoid any bubbles on the belly. Then it was time for the side parts. There were a lot of work before wrapping for all these parts for the fuselage, because they are really complex shape. So before I have put the foil on the fuselage, I did all the measuring. I tried to make the parts, the foil parts, as exactly as possible to avoid any cutting after putting the foil onto the fuselage. When you want to put on a raw piece of foil onto the fuselage and cut the lines, the clean lines, after you have put the foil on the fuselage, you have a really hard time to do clean cuts. I didn't figure out a nice solution to cut clean lines on the fuselage, so I really recommend to do all the measuring, all the exact size and shape you need for your foil parts on the fuselage, on complex parts in general. Do all this measuring stuff, cutting stuff before you go on the fuselage. This way you have a way easier time. Then it was time for the cover of the top side, and same here, I did all the cutting before I started to wrap the part, to put the part on the fuselage. As you can see, everything is cut in the exact right shape, so I just had to make sure that I put it in the exact right position onto the fuselage. And if this is done, it's a really easy job to do the rest, to make sure that all the foil looks good and all the lines are pretty clean cut, and like this you get an absolutely beautiful result. Then I had to cut off the hole for the cover for the electronics on the fuselage. That was a pretty easy job, just cut around the shape and do some cuts to wrap the foil around the corners and around the edges to make the wrap look clean. Then it was time for the black parts for the rear end of the fuselage, also with the scrappy leathers. That was the most tricky part. For the scrappy leathers, I put the raw foil into my silhouette plotter and cut the leathers out of the foil, and then I used some transfer foil to keep the area of the leathers in perfect shape while putting the foil on the fuselage. But that was really the most tricky part to put on, also because the whole black part goes all around the round belly down to center line of the lower fuselage. On the right side you can see here, I didn't use the perfect technique to put on that foil part, so I had a really hard time to avoid wrinkles because of the round shaped belly. It took some time to make sure that everything looks good. That was really a tough one, but in the end, yeah, it looked good. But on the left side part I then used another technique, which is also time demanding but was a little bit easier to get it nice and clean. As you can see, I'd always lift again a little bit and rub down and lift again, and only like this I was able to avoid any wrinkles. Then I had to cut out the areas for the air intake and air outlet on the side of the fuselage and stick it on with using the heat gun to make it fit perfect. On the rear end, the part is pretty tricky in shape, so I had to do a lot of cuts and tried to make it also nice and clean, and had to put on a few small bits, additional bits to cover all the white small areas on the rear end. Then it was time for the second side. As you can see, I try another technique to put on the foil, so I only stuck it on the top edge of the fuselage and then went slowly from top to bottom, and like this I tried to avoid this tricky situation on all the round belly. It went better. It was still tricky, took a lot of time, but that was absolutely the easier way to put on the foil nice and clean without getting in trouble. One thing what makes me really happy is that I was able to make the two parts fit perfectly together. So you have that arrow-shaped end on the bottom side, and these two black parts need to fit perfectly together. So you have a perfect, nice tip on the bottom side on these black parts, and that really worked absolutely perfect. That was a real surprise for me. Then I prepared the fuselage for the orange line beside the scrappy leathers. For this I took some masking tape to get the line where I had to put on the orange round shaped line. I also plotted this orange piece to make sure it has already the right arc and put it on both sides. Also using transfer tape to keep the foil stable, because when you have such thin Oracal you can stretch it way too easy. It helps if you put on transfer foil to keep the Oracal foil perfectly in shape. Then it was time for the cockpit. That was also an exciting moment because it's kind of the face of the plane. It's so unique, the cockpit windows of Scrappy. The basic part is in grey. I simply took the full scale shape and tried to adapt it to RC Scrappy, which worked pretty well. On the rear end, I then had to remove some foil of the silver part of the fuselage, just because if I kept that silver part on the fuselage, there would be a slight step of the foil underneath the window, which would be visible, so that wouldn't look nice. So I cut it off this silver part because I didn't want to have this little step in the window visible. And for this I used some masking tape, cut it off the exact shape I needed for making the windows look absolutely perfect. And then it was time to put on the rear end part of the windows, and like this the windows look perfectly clean. Then it was time for the window part on the front side window. So that was also a very special shape, and that was, for me, it was too complex to make it on the plotter. So I decided to measure all the radius and all that stuff and cut it by hand, and the result is okay. I'm pretty happy how it ended up, and yeah, the cockpit looks pretty cool. Then it was time for the black frame of the windows. This I made on the silhouette plotter. I designed the whole frame and plotted it because that shape was really tricky to cut it by hand. So I used the plotter, and I really don't regret to use it because the frame looks really awesome. Then I used also transfer foil to keep the frame in shape. If you don't use transfer foil, your super flexible Oracal foil will get in strange shape and you won't be able to put it clean on the fuselage. So like this you have a perfect result with using transfer foil. Then I used Molotov liquid chrome marker to put on all the rivets on the window frames and put it on the Flying Cowboys logo onto the double wishbone suspension. That's really one of the cool parts of the wrapping job because I really love the Flying Cowboys logo. And then it was time for the wheels design. The most important was the Alaskan bush wheel leathers. For this I also used transfer foil and put a rod into the center of the wheel, and like this I had a perfect support to get the leathers in perfect shape onto the right position on the wheel, and there is no wobbling of the leathers or something, but they sit absolutely where they should. The foil doesn't stick absolutely perfect on the foam, on this EPS foam of the wheels, but if you take your time and use your heat gun, they stick pretty well. Then it was time for the best Tugs logo on the vertical stabilizer. For this I just measured the position I need to put it on. Also used transfer foil like for every other letters or logo. I put it on the plane, and the transfer foil didn't work absolutely perfect, as you can see here. It really takes some time to make sure that every bit of the foil comes off. Then I did the sheriff stars, but these are not plotted, but printed with my laser printer on some waterproof white self-adhesive foil. I covered them with clear self-adhesive foil. Like this, I was able to put them on the fuselage and on the wings, and also have a shiny surface with this clear foil. The clear foil I plotted to make the stars look perfectly clean. And this is the final result. This is RC SCRAPPY, how it looks after all the wrapping. The only parts I didn't wrap were the slats, the suspension and the cowling. The cowling was simply too complex in shape to wrap it with foil, so I decided to go with some silver paint. The result is really awesome. It was almost 2 years of work for the whole build, including the wrap job, and I'm looking forward to spring to go for more test flights. So this was all the content about wrapping RC SCRAPPY. Thanks a lot for watching. See you in the next one. More RC SCRAPPY content will follow. Have a good time. Happy flying. Bye bye.